Illinois Stories is brought to you by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by the support of viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome. And welcome to Illinois Stories. I'm Mark McDonald in Quincy. And this is our annual Spring On the Road with Illinois Stories bus tour. We'll be taking these viewers up to Warsaw at the Kibbe Biological Station. We'll be going to Hamilton from the Western Illinois Threshers, over to Keokuk, back into Carthage, and then back to Quincy. It's going to be a busy day. I hope you enjoy it.
Well, like you said, my name's Sean Jenkins and I'm director of the field station. I've been director since 2002. We've been here since 1964. If you notice the name, the Alice L. Kibbe Field Station. Anybody know who Alice L. Kibbe was? Any of y'all go to Carthage College? And Carthage, she was a botanist and department chair of the biology department at Carthage College for almost 40 years. And then when she retired in '64, she gave the initial 115 acres that make up the station to Western because Carthage College decided to move to Wisconsin. And so she was a little bit upset about that, so she left us the land with the understanding that we would open a field station for research and for educating students at the university and in the larger community. So we've been here since '64. We teach summer classes out here. We have 2 4-week sessions. One of them starts in the middle of May and goes to the middle of June. The next one from the middle of June to the middle of July. And so they're 4 weeks long, 4 hours a day, 4 days a week. And I'm right in the middle of teaching freshwater biology from 1 to 5 in the afternoon. And we've been doing that since about 1966. A lot of what we do is river research. So the first thing we're going to show y'all is some of the boats that we actually do research with. So what we'll start out is I'll take and show you the shocking boat, and then we'll go up, well, maybe I'll show you the bigger boat first since it's farther away. How's that? It'll carry 15,000 pounds and draft 6 inches because about from a foot down and below, it's got a sealed air chamber. So would be pretty hard to sink this thing. You might flip it over in the wind with the canopy, but it wouldn't probably sink, although they said that about the Titanic too, right? But, so it's got a 200 horsepower engine. We have side scanning sonar and depth finder, so you can look at stuff on the bottom for placing nets. It's good because then you don't put a net right where you've got a big snag and tear your net up. It's got ship-to-shore radio. It'll do about 57 miles an hour with the wind at your back, so it moves pretty good. Well, that's a dragonfly, naiad or nymph. Yep, so in their abdomen they have gills and they literally pull water into their butt and breathe through there, called labial mass that comes down, and then they got these mouth parts that can kind of just grab onto stuff and they pull it into there. It's the same thing, they use that mask when they're flying as adults to kind of scoop things out of the air. So they're air feeders, they catch things on the wing.
Is he on top of the water? He's
down in the sediment right on, he's what they call a benthic macrophyte. He's sitting down there on the bottom, crawling through the vegetation and across this mud and stuff, so very common. I just dropped him again.
About everything. So if you go through the museum building over there, you can see the high crops, the orchards, and the regular tractors that the farmers use. If you want to walk, I'll take you down the gravel road, and we'll go down to the schoolhouse, the log cabin, and the church. I'll tell you a little about the church when we get down there. Log cabin. We went over by Ottumwa, Iowa, and took the building down and brought it over here and put it back up and did all the work ourselves. And you see the church, what I was talking about, we cut the top off of that thing down where them shingles was. And we had to take off that much so we could get under the electric wires. And so then we brought it in on a lowboy and backed her up there and set her down. And most of the buildings, like this schoolhouse, that came about down by Sutter, Illinois, is where that schoolhouse came. And one of our members, board members now, he graduated from 8th grade there in that building.
I understand now they're having tours, bus tours of one-room schools.
You see here on this end, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 logs has been replaced. And we hand chiseled them out and put them in there. So we sold them with the sawmill down here. My boy runs a sawmill down here at the far end. But you can go in and look and see there's a bedroom upstairs. You climbed up a ladder and went to bed up there. And
As we cross the Mississippi River into Keokuk, I pointed out the Mississippi Power Dam, which just recently celebrated its 100th anniversary, making it the oldest power dam in the country. So when we got to Keokuk, we came here to this exhibit celebrating that anniversary. Right now, the folks are going through this exhibit with some of the man who they're talking to right now actually managed the power plant for many years until his retirement.
Prior to that last glacier, Keokuk was in Illinois. Now, we don't say anything about Illinois since you folks are from Illinois, but Keokuk was in Illinois, and the last great glacier filled in the old river. The old river is upwards of 5 miles wide and 120 to 150 foot deeper than the present river. In 1993, it tried to take it back, and it flooded all the way over to Wayland, which is the banks of the old river. Rapids prevented, except in extreme flood times, it prevented boats from going upstream. And at that point in time, they thought there might be some solutions. And eventually, of course, the Corps of Engineers built the canal and started in about 1862, about the time of the Civil War. So they completed that, and then the boats could lock through. Now, there were 3 locks. Now, why don't we look at the pictures? These are all pictures from our, we have quite a collection of pictures from the construction. And as a matter of fact, we have some 1,100 pictures that were made available, and we've got those on a CD. We've rearranged these a little bit, so it's a little bit of a problem. And if I screw up, why, that's okay. What this is what we call the power plant at the lock itself. The Corps asked the company to put a power unit in the lock powerhouse. They have 2 hydro turbines that drive these huge pulleys that are connected to compressors down there, because the old lock used a lot of air to raise and lower the upper gates. They still used cables and hydraulics on the lower gate, but the upper gate was all air actuated. And this is the dike that protected the building of the plant. And in 1912, they had an ice jam that caused all kinds of problems. They called all the people out. We've actually lost, I think, 13 gates that were pushed out by ice. And I had the fortunate experience of watching one bit pushed out. It was in the springtime, and during the spring rise, of course, you know, you get a lot of ice. When you think about a sheet of ice that may be a foot thick and 3/4 of a mile long and a half a mile wide coming down the river, when it hits the dam, it hits with a pretty good bump. And it was piling. We had some of the gates open, and it was piling up on the gate that were not open. And it kept piling up, and it was probably 25 foot high, and all of a sudden, it disappeared. And I was on the upstream side, so I rushed down to the other side of the dam to see if I could see anything. All I could see was spray.
Well, the church in 1938 called a missionary couple, about my age, to come back to move to Carthage from Salt Lake City and to research and oversee the restoration, to turn it from a lovely home back into the county jail it had originally been. And they did that. They did even some of the work themselves, and then they stayed on and showed tours through the jail, much as I'm going to do today for you. Interestingly, those people served a 20-year mission. 18 months seemed like a pretty good time to me. 20 years, that's pushing it. Do you have any questions of anything you've seen or heard up to this point? If not, let's go. We'll be going through the summer kitchen. That was added on in 1850, and you understand the need for summer kitchens. I can't even imagine how miserable it must have been from 1841 to 1850, whoever was doing the cooking. Let's go on in and see. My husband is leading the way there, and you can just follow him. We'll just go through the summer kitchen and into the jail. Now, the furnishings, the artifacts that you see are typical of the 1840s period, but are not known to have been here in the jail in the 1840s. However, the doors and the door frames, the window frames, all of that woodwork is original. Some of the window panes are, and some of the flooring is. And so it has a historic significance, having been changed from a jail to a home and back to a jail. They must have been very careful in their research and in their work. This room is known as the debtor's cell, and this is where the history of Carthage jail and the history of Joseph and Hiram Smith come together. On June 25th of 1844, Joseph and Hiram reported to the jail. Governor Ford had commanded them to come and turn themselves in. Now remember, this is the end of June. It's going to be hot and muggy. 10 men trying to sleep in this room must have been a little uncomfortable. And then, to add to their discomfort, outside in the community and even right close around the jail were groups of angry men who were heavily armed, rifles, shotguns, pistols, knives, who were making threats against the Mormons in general and against the Smith brothers in particular. So it must have been a very uneasy night and a very unpleasant one in this cell. They spent the day, passed it. I'm sure it was uneasy and I'm sure it was a worrisome time, but they made it through the day, and it came bedtime. Joseph and Hiram were sleeping on the bed. Willard Richards was writing at the desk over here in the corner by candlelight, and the other 4 men were sleeping on the floor. About midnight, a shot was fired outside, and it awakened Joseph. He got out of bed and laid down on the floor between Dan Jones and John Fulmer. He turned first to Dan Jones and said, "Brother Jones, are you afraid to die?" And Dan Jones asked, "Has it come to that, think you?" "No, engaged in a cause such as this, I think that death holds no terrors for me." And then Joseph prophesied, "Brother Dan, you will yet live to see your native Wales and to fulfill the mission that God has allotted you." Well, that prophecy was fulfilled. Dan Jones served multiple missions to his native Wales, and it is said that he baptized over 5,000 people. I'm grateful that he did, because one of those was an ancestor of mine. Then Joseph turned to the man on the other side, John Fulmer, and he said, "Here, Brother John, lay your head on my arm for a pillow." "Oh, Brother Fulmer, how I would love to see my family again. And I would to God that I could preach to the saints in Nauvoo just one more time." Well, that was not to be. They made it through the night, and then it was morning of June 27th. Joseph sent 3 more men out of the jail on errands, and so now we have just 4 men here in the room.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Hancock County Courthouse in Carthage. We thank you for visiting. My name is Steve Evans. I'm a retired circuit judge, and I'll be your guide and be happy to try to answer your questions today. I've lived in this community for over 40 years, which is hard for me to imagine, but I've been in contact with the community for historical interest for more years than that. So we're going to, one thing I need to say, this county has always been able to generate a lot of controversy. And that's been a good thing for those of us who are lawyers, but it also has to do with some of the history of the courthouse. We need a new courthouse. 125 to 150,000 will spend. We need a new courthouse. The only thing they left out was where. Immediately the campaign started. Warsaw versus Carthage. And it was a bitter campaign in the press. And in 1902 there was a referendum, and there were 4,200 people voted to go to Warsaw, and 3,600 people voted to stay in Carthage. That's the initial reaction. But the Constitution that we lawyers worship at that time in Illinois said, if you are moving away from the county seat, from the center of the county, you've got to get 60%. They got about 55. The courthouse was here. Bond referendum was put on the ballot in 1904. It failed. Warsaw voted against it. They came right back in 1906, and it passed. Warsaw offered $80,000 if they'd come there. Carthage offered $10,000 and sidewalks and all utilities. Of course, all utilities at that time was water, but they offered that. I don't know if they're still paying it or not. So the courthouse was built. So let's walk up to the courthouse here. Let me get over on this side of you and I'll keep talking. The courthouse is built out of Bedford limestone from Bedford, Indiana, which was considered a prime building material in those days. You know, we have a lot of tours here with school kids, and their perspective is, believe it or not, a bit different than many of you who are probably my contemporaries. I'm talking about the older ones like you and you. But you know what they're struck by when they come into this building, the kids? They say, what's this thing over here? It's a telephone booth. It's where Superman changes clothes. They haven't seen that. You can see up on, we're in what we call the first floor. The second floor is offices and a small courtroom. The third floor is a large courtroom. And you can see we have a rotunda above that, and there's a second stained glass rotunda in the courtroom that is upstairs. One of the interesting sidelights in this building are, think when we're built here, 1907, restrooms, bathrooms. We all remember bathrooms, okay? There's a men's room right around the corner. Fairly traditional, we don't need to go see it. Down here on the left, there was a room called the ladies' restroom. Not a bathroom, not a toilet room, but a restroom. And what was it for? To rest. That's exactly right. When the men drove in here 15 miles in the buggy with their wives, those poor delicate women who lived out on the farm and milked cows and did everything else, had to have a place where they could rest and recover their composure. And some of our other courthouses had that. So they went into the restroom, and there was a little closet bathroom in there, but it was more of a restroom. I think there was probably a plumber on the architect's payroll. We were talking about the architect getting rich, because this building, in addition to those rooms, has 17 individual bathrooms. In 1907, when probably 90% of the houses in this community did not have indoor plumbing. You know, I told you there was a bond referendum in 1906 that passed. It authorized expenditure of $125,000 to build this building. It came in under budget, $117,820 and how many cents, John? Okay. And they used the rest of the money for furniture and furnishings. But how often would a building come in under that? And can you imagine, I can't imagine what it would begin to start to take to build a building like this today. These are associate and county judges. And you can see they're pretty rough-looking characters, and someday Judge Gambrell's picture will be up there with them. Some of the things I'd like to point out here, first of all, the stained glass window over there, that when the sun is just right, is absolutely gorgeous. And there's also other stained glass on both sides of that staircase near the top, as well as stained glass on the ceiling over there. I can't recall how many years ago it was. I think probably early 90s. A person was here looking at it, and they said that probably that stained glass window at that time would cost somewhere between $700,000 and $1 million, $700,000 and $1 million if we had to replace it. Yeah. So we don't want anybody throwing anything here. This is a fish scale glass on both this dome and the one in the courtroom. Again, the same wainscoting here. Back here we have offices, we have a jury room, and the judge's chambers upstairs. The courtroom here is wonderful, but I have to put a big asterisk by it. Sadly, there's a leak in the roof, and it's come down, and it's caused problems on the wall, and it's what we look at when we see it, and it's sad. Hopefully, it will be resolved, but we'll ignore that. So we'll step around and go in the courtroom. But it is where the jury trials are conducted in this county. In mentioning jury trials, we have to go back to the previous courthouse, the 1839 courthouse. The first trial here was a murder trial. And over on the other side of the courthouse from where we came in, there is a Meeting Lincoln sign, or that's not the right characterization, but it's one of the Lincoln signs. Lincoln was one of the defense attorneys in that case. The sign says that it was one of the few cases that he lost that was a murder case. It was the only case in Hancock County where a defendant was executed. And in those days, that drew a good crowd. The trial was in the spring, and there was no appeal, and the execution was a matter of a few weeks later. The scales of justice, again, are prevalent here. The judge sits up in the far chair. The clerk sits here. The lawyers and their clients are at the main tables here. The chairs over along that wall were where those lawyers who had a case that wasn't called yet used to sit. We got special treatment. We could sit over here.
What a day. We were outside most of the day, and we got really lucky with the weather because they were calling for thunderstorms this afternoon, but we got by. Our next trip will be out of Springfield in October. With another Illinois Story in Quincy, I'm Mark McDonald. Thanks for watching.
Illinois Stories is brought to you by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by the support of viewers like you. Thank you. For a DVD copy of the program you've just seen, send 1995 to Network Knowledge, P.O. Box 6248, Springfield, Illinois 62708. Be sure to include the program name, subject, and when the program aired. You can also order with your credit card by calling 800-232-3605.